You're probably tired of hearing the same thing about the Ukraine war. Today, X missiles, Y drones, Z dead and wounded. It sounds like an infinite news replay. We hear it, shake our heads, and move on with our lives. But today, I want to propose a different lens. Instead of seeing the Ukraine war as a distant horror newscast, look at it for what it has become in 2026. A laboratory. A laboratory where the world is testing the cheap war of the future. On one side, relatively cheap drones, precision-guided munitions, targeting software, and swarms of small equipment. On the other side, expensive air defense systems, intelligence, satellites, secure communications, 24/7 information warfare. And while you see headlines scrolling through your timeline, China, Iran, the US, Israel, and several other actors are taking notes. Because what's being learned in Ukraine doesn't stay in Ukraine. It carries over to the next conflict. Today, I want to show you what changed from 2022 to 2026, how current attacks reveal this new model of warfare, what this means for Taiwan, the Middle East, Europe, and most importantly, what this means for public budgets, debt, market sectors, and your money.
Let's quickly go back to 2022. At the beginning of that war, the dominant image was classic. Tanks crossing borders, military columns, heavy artillery, rapid advance, global shock. It was almost like World War II warfare with 21st century technology. Shocking, yes, but still a familiar mental model. Cut to 2026. What we see today is something else. The war has shifted from an attempted blitzkrieg to a long war of attrition. And in that process, three elements have gained center stage. First, drones. Kamikaze drones, FPV drones, adapted commercial drones. Equipment that costs a fraction of a fighter jet, a tank, an expensive missile, but can destroy armored vehicles, artillery positions, ammunition depots. Second, precision-guided munitions and deep strikes. Missiles, rockets, bombs designed to hit critical infrastructure, bridges, supply lines, and increasingly deep targets, far from the front line. Third, real-time information warfare attack. Every attack becomes a 20, 30-second video, seen by millions of people. The drone's camera is as important as the drone's explosive. It's not just for aiming. It's for communicating, convincing, humiliating, propagandizing, gaining international support. That's why I call Ukraine in 2026 a cheap war laboratory. It's the combination of three things: relatively cheap damage, scale, and global narrative.
Okay, Adrian, but what's happening today in practice that shows this? Let's look at the pattern, not the detail. First, drone attacks. Ukrainian drones hitting targets inside Russia, fuel depots, industrial facilities, military bases. Russian drones hitting Ukrainian cities, electrical infrastructure, logistics. You're no longer talking about a war where combat stays confined to the front line. You're talking about a conflict where any location, refinery, bridge, power station, can become a target, and at a much lower cost than in the past. Second, deep strikes with missiles and guided munitions. What once seemed unthinkable, hitting sensitive infrastructure inside a country with relatively cheap, long-range weaponry, has become routine. This applies both to Russia hitting Ukrainian infrastructure and to Ukraine hitting targets on Russian soil. Third, the narrative battle. Every attack generates images, generates narrative, generates a battle of versions. It was military. It was civilian. It was legitimate. It was a crime. And these narratives aren't just moral, they're strategic. They affect domestic public opinion, international support, arms shipments, sanctions, the position of neutral countries. What does this set of attacks show? That war today is less about tank divisions, more about who can, with less money, cause more damage and more symbolic impact. That's the central point.
The barrier to entry for causing destruction has fallen. You no longer need to be a superpower with unlimited budgets. Drones, software, open source intelligence, and social media have leveled part of this game. And that's excellent news if you're an actor who wants to cause damage, and terrible news if you're the one who has to defend infrastructure, population, energy routes, and stability.
Let's step away from Ukraine for a moment and look at who's watching this laboratory with maximum attention. Taiwan and China. China is seeing in real time how air defenses can be saturated by swarms of cheap drones. Precision strikes on infrastructure can paralyze entire regions. Information warfare shapes the global narrative about who's the aggressor, who's the victim, who's responsible. Any scenario in the Taiwan Strait today incorporates lessons from Ukraine. It's not just amphibious landing versus island defense. It's drone warfare over the strait and strategic targets. Cyber and information attacks before the first shot. Attempts to economically isolate the adversary parallel to the physical battlefield. The Middle East. Iran, Israel, and various armed groups have used drones for a long time. But the scale and creativity seen in Ukraine update the playbook. Attacks on refineries, pipelines, ships on strategic routes, military bases, all of this can follow patterns being tested now. Every new successful or failed attack becomes a case study. Europe. Europe discovered in the most painful way possible that it wasn't prepared for a long, high-intensity war in its backyard. It depended more than it wanted on energy from a country that became an adversary. It had underinvested in defense, munitions, logistics, critical infrastructure. The result is a race. Increased military spending, reinforcement of ammunition stockpiles, investment in air defense, drones, cybersecurity, reconfiguration of energy and supply chains. Now the question almost no one asks is, who pays for this laboratory? Because war isn't just about blood. It's about budgets. Let's start with military budgets. NATO countries increasing defense spending. European states rearming, stockpiling ammunition, buying air defense systems, investing in drones, satellites, cyber. The United States maintaining a massive military budget. Eastern European countries making historic rearmament efforts. All of this costs, and it's not cheap. The cheap war is cheap to attack, but it's very expensive to defend. Because a drone costing a few $1,000s can be intercepted by a missile costing hundreds of thousands. You need layers of defense. You need redundancy, intelligence, integration. This brings us to the second point. Public debt. Many of these countries already had high debt. Now they're adding permanent military spending. This is a new structural expense. It's not just a crisis spike. It becomes a new baseline. Who pays for this? Through taxes? Through inflation? Through cuts in other areas? Health, education, civilian infrastructure? Or through a combination of all? Third point. Market sectors. Who tends to benefit from this new warfare paradigm? Traditional defense, munitions, artillery, radar systems, armored vehicles. So next time you hear, today, another attack in Ukraine, another drone, another missile, try a small mental exercise. Don't just see it as tragic noise. See it as another experiment inside this grand laboratory. An experiment that's teaching the world how to wage cheaper, more distributed wars, testing the limits of democratic society's patience with long wars, redefining public spending priorities, and paving the ground for future conflicts elsewhere. China, Iran, the US, Israel, all are taking notes. The question is, are you? If you want to keep receiving this systems-level analysis, connecting war, technology, economics, and the future of your money, subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button.